in later. So hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Amanda Gangwish. I'm the program director at Conservation Nebraska. So I will be your host here today. With us, we have Dan, who is going to give us a presentation on stormwater management, the stormwater management program. I'm not going to steal too much of his thunder. I'll let him really dive into what he's going to talk about there. Few housekeeping notes for you guys before I hand it over. Just so you're all aware, your video is off and you are muted. So no worries if you're got kids running around in the background, you want to eat an afternoon snack. We can't see or hear any of that. So just so you know there. That does mean if you have any questions for either myself in terms of any technical things, or if you have any questions for Dan about the actual bulk of this program, feel free to drop those either into the chat box or the Q&A function. We're going to save all the questions until the end, but I will keep track of those and we will make sure to get those questions answered for you. So with that, I am just going to hand it straight over to Dan, who is going to take things away.
Hello, my name is Dan Lillis. I'm the City of Kearney Stormwater Program Manager. I've been the City of Kearney's Stormwater Program Manager for the last 6 years, and I had no prior experience to stormwater prior to this. I went to UNK, degree in geography. Then I went to the Peace Corps for a couple of years in Africa, and where I was in geography and agroforestry and farming. And then I came back to Kearney and was a construction resident inspector on civil projects. So after that, I applied for this job and got it, and was just learned a lot in the first few months. We had an EPA audit that I had to study for and get ready for out of the blue, and I helped the city get through that. And so since then, I've been managing this program and kind of tweaking it here and there to meet EPA and state regulations. So what I would like to do today is I would like to talk about the stormwater management program, which is actually something that's required for every municipality that has a population over 10,000 people. And it's stormwater management program is what it is called. So I'm going to try and work this presentation here. There we go. So everyone listening or watching this presentation is here because they have a common interest, and that is environmental conservation. In this case, water quality is what the stormwater program inevitably does, improves water quality, and that's a form of environmental conservation. So we're going to talk about what stormwater is and why it can be a problem for communities. The fact is that every community has stormwater. We'll talk about what the average community over 10,000 is doing to manage stormwater and how these activities will benefit us. So the big question is, what is stormwater? Of course, that's a stupid question. I know everyone here probably knows what that is, but I've done presentations for people ranging in middle school, high school, college, old folks' homes, elementary school students, and it's something that needs to be addressed specifically and defined. And that is stormwater is rainwater, snow melt, anything that falls from the sky, and when that comes with it is what is stormwater pollution. Stormwater pollution is whatever is carried by that rainwater or the snow melt, and it takes it downstream with it and drops it into receiving waters. So where does this stormwater go? Receiving waters I just mentioned, but it differs for every municipality. And for the city of Kearney, where I'm from, it's that we have two drainage basins which water leads to. We have the Wood River Basin to the north and the north channel of the Platte River to the south of us. And it's not quite half and half for Kearney, but it pretty much gets divided up to the north and south. It travels over land through streets, curb and gutters, which direct it towards curb inlets, which then takes it through storm pipes and a conveyance system of ditches or channels or whatnot, where it inevitably leads to a lake, stream, river, or pond. So we have multiple forms of stormwater pollution. We have point source and we have non-point source. And point source essentially is where you can see it coming out of a pipe. And the best example of this is industry. When you have stormwater pollution that's being coming off of the roof, coming off of the parking lot, and also mixed with perhaps an illicit discharge, which I'll talk about later on, and going into a stormwater retention cell, detention cell, lake, stream, river, etc., through a pipe, what we call an outfall. Non-point source is more unidentifiable, more untraceable, such as agricultural runoff with regards to herbicides, pesticides, waste from animals, from livestock, and then not necessarily in the agricultural sector, but within an urban sector, you have floatables. You see this all the time. You see plastic bags, you see foam cups, etc. And those are a form of non-point source. We know where they come from, but they're so general. One truck is not the source of everything. So it's just non-point source. Let's see here. Here's an example. This image here pretty much describes it. You have sewage treatment plants, industrial facilities for point source. Non-point source is less obvious. And an interesting story. When the Clean Water Act first came out in the 1970s, the percentages of stormwater pollution were 75% of stormwater pollution came from industry, and 25 came from the urban sector or non-industry, so residential. Due to the creation of the Clean Water Act, that has completely reversed because of all the regulations that have been placed on industry. It's now 25% of overall stormwater pollution is from industry, and 75% is through non-point source in general. So why is stormwater a problem? In fact, it looks like I have my lines here bad. It should be switched around. The problem really is the development of locations, development of municipalities and urbanization. And when I say problem, you have areas that were built 50 years ago at the time were designed with a certain diameter of pipe to account for the stormwater that was created with the impervious surface, non-impenetrable or non-infiltratable surfaces. And since then, though, that area around urbanized areas has grown. And so you have more volume, and that's being directed towards the same small pipe that was originally designed for a smaller quantity. And so you have a decrease in the quality of water because you have no place for it to go except for the pipes, and you have increase in the quantity because you have higher impervious surface than you did before. And that's just the developed and disturbed land. Developed, as I mentioned, development, urbanization. We're going to come across here a few examples of non-point source pollution. And this example is obviously grease or oil sheen on a parking lot from a vehicle. And that's a very common non-point source. Think of all the thousands, if not millions of vehicles there are just in the United States that if there's a fraction of those have a leak, you can have a substantial source, but it's still general throughout, so it's non-point. If it was identifiable to one specific location that could be controlled, then that would be point source, but this is non-point. And this picture is a picture of what I call a floatable. It looks like a coffee cup with a napkin in it. And this is very common seen around the country. I just came back from a little road trip, and so I saw it. I was throughout 8 states, and I saw this on the side of roads everywhere. Just floatables that these could be eliminated or minimized. You can't eliminate anything. You can minimize it though. One thing can be helped is throwing floatables or debris like this into just a plastic bag that has a seal on it, either a drawstring or folded over. So when you throw it into your trash can and the garbage man comes and picks it up, it doesn't go flying all over the place, especially with Nebraska's wind. Another thing is these things could be blown out of someone's tail or a truck of a bed that they just throw it there before they drive somewhere and it gets taken out, and that could be avoided. And here's an example of what is noticeable, the color of the water. That's just brown, and that's from the sediments and clays from a construction site. So a proper construction site should have an erosion and sediment control plan, which has what we call best management practices on it. These best management practices could be things like perimeter controls, which minimize the runoff or hold back runoff so it doesn't leave a site. Curb inlet protection is another example. So placing just a wattle, as we call them, in front of a curb inlet so water can't get in there without being filtered first. And rock entrance is a good example of what every major construction site should have. Rock entrance would try to eliminate and minimize the amount of mud that comes off of a wheel on the street by eliminating it at the job site. If you'll give me a second here, I'm going to take a drink of water. Thank you. Okay, this is the result of a combination of all the previous things I discussed. This is flooding. If you have floatables, if you have erosion from a job site, and other residential issues such as leaves or grass clippings that accumulate in the storm sewer system. So the curb inlet or the pipes get clogged because of the amount of material that goes into it. There's no space for the water, or it blocks it and jams it and dams it from water, allowing water to go past. And it causes localized flooding. So why is stormwater a problem? And I don't think stormwater is the problem. Honestly, I think stormwater pollution is the problem. Just a second. All right, apologize for that. I had a phone call. So non-stormwater discharges enter systems. Non-stormwater discharges are anything such as the oil leak, as we mentioned, from a vehicle. Illicit discharge is what that is really. Non-stormwater discharges, anything that's not water from the sky, not rain and not snow melt. Then you have illicit connections, and that is if you have a older business that decided to not update itself. So in the 60s and 70s, when the Clean Water Act was just becoming prevalent, the original way to connect sanitary or even oil waste from, let's say, an automobile mechanic shop would be connected directly to the storm sewer, and that would then feed into the receding lakes and rivers. So in 1972 or so, when the Clean Water Act was enacted, they removed those connections and then made that illicit connection connect to the sanitary sewer, where it goes to a wastewater treatment center and gets treated before it goes to the rivers. I'm going to describe two systems here. One is evident right here. This is what we call a municipal separate storm sewer system. We call it MS4 for short. This has a separate storm pipe from the sewer pipe, and they take them to two different locations. The storm pipe on the right goes directly to the receiving waters and lakes and streams, and the sewer pipe, the sanitary sewer, has waste, goes to a wastewater treatment plant. And they're at two different locations under a street normally. I would help inspect roads and design roads and civil projects. And we have the storm sewers on one side, the sanitary sewer is substantially deeper, usually in the center of the street in Kearney. So the other older system is what we call a combined sewer overflow. And that is, I think, Omaha is the only example of that in the state of Nebraska. And they're actually working with substantial grant monies to separate the storm sewer from the sanitary sewer for certain parts of Old Town Omaha. And the combined sewer overflow combines what you see here in these two pipes into one, and it sends it to a wastewater treatment plant. Well, the problem is, yeah, the storm water at that time on a regular rain event, small rain event, would get treated. But when you have a monstrous flood or a high, like a 80-year rain event, whatever the particular rain event may be, it does not all get treated, and it overflows the treatment center and takes with it the sanitary sewer material that it came with. And so there's a big substantial hazard there to the environment. So we're separating those to become the separate storm sewer system. And I am not a biologist, I'm not a chemist. I do know that there are many levels of pollutants, And what you see here, some of these are microbials, and they are just so small you can barely see them with the naked eye, but they are still a form of pollutant. What should all be noted is that I mentioned the word before, floatables. That I compare those, consider those the two types of pollutants. You have microbials and floatables, ones you can see and ones you can't. And I think that sediments, you can see them. I would not consider that a microbial, but anything that is trace, like that, toxic chemicals, chlorides, bacteria, those would be considered microbials, I believe. So now we know about stormwater and its impacts. What are we going to do about it? And from this point on, I will talk about what we as a municipality do for populations over 10,000. And also, I may throw in some hints there, here and there, about what individuals can do as well on a residential level. So the Stormwater Permit Program for small communities is called an NER 310,000 permit, 3-1 and then 4 zeros. And that was created in 2017 by the DEE. Well, it followed special regulations from the EPA. And I tell you what, with that audit that we went through with the EPA, I memorized that permit, and it's some pretty dry reading considering it's wet material. So what does our permit require? It requires to implement a stormwater management program. It requires to track the progress towards those goals and the report on that progress. The City of Kearney implemented our stormwater program in 2007, and we made updates to it throughout. So we have a database and Excel spreadsheet that we keep track of our progress there. I know I said progress earlier, but it's progress towards the goals. And then we have an annual report that we send to the DEE every April that discusses our progress towards those goals. And essentially, our report is our actual program. So we fill in the blanks of what we did over the course of a year, and then we just send that in, and it's usually about 50 pages or so. I know Omaha's was at one point 80 pages, and then they got audited by the EPA, and I think theirs is going to increase substantially. So every stormwater management program has 6 MCMs, and every aspect of every job has acronyms, and these all have acronyms at the wazoo. You have MCMs, minimum control measures. And the first MCM is public education and outreach, that's PEO. Second one is public involvement participation, PIP. Then we have construction stormwater site runoff management, that's just CSRM. And then post-construction, PCSM, and illicit discharge detection elimination, IDDE, good housekeeping, pollution prevention. I will talk about all of these, so I don't anticipate any questions like, what is he talking about right now? The first MCM is public education and outreach, or PEO. And essentially what we do is we have activities, or we participate or create opportunities for people to become informed or educated on what stormwater management is and what stormwater pollution is. Some examples of that around Kearney are the Fort Kearney Outdoor Expo, which is where we have a state recreational area that is the host, if you will, by the Game and Parks Commission to dozens and dozens of schools from the region. We've had schools from Colorado to Iowa that come to this and interact with activities that inform of environmental conservation methods, or just things that are fun like BB guns or slingshots or kayaking. And these are all school-age children from, I believe, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. So I usually get the University of Nebraska Lincoln Extension program out there to help us with activities that try to inform the youth about the stormwater pollution and ways to minimize it. And at this point, we are hoping to get a basis to inform the public and get them educated at the point where they care, and they care enough to do the following. public involvement and participation, or they care enough to get to a point where we can support them as they get active with this information that they've just learned or have accumulated or become involved and interested in. Public involvement participation is we provide public notice on changes, updates to ordinances or to activities. If there is a special interest group that wants to be active and wants to do things, I post things, press releases. I have a Facebook, Twitter account for our stormwater management plan that we have. We actually have followers for that. We have, I think, 45 Twitter followers, and we have 159 or 60 followers on Facebook. So we get impressions, and we have a target audience that can get this information out there and review it. A couple of volunteer programs we have, which are awesome for public involvement, hence participation, is one is storm drain markers. These are emblems that can be found, and this is a requirement by the permit to mark any curb inlet with some sort of either emblem or sticker or paint that states this drains to a river. And so we have emblems, and I have this on presentation mode. So I have examples in my office, but it's not worth the effort to have to disconnect the screen sharing. So we have essentially it's like a 4-inch diameter medallion that has tar adhesive in the back with a fish in the middle, and it says no dumping, drains to river around it. And we stick it right on the deck on the top of a curb inlet or area inlet. Therefore, people ideally see that before they dump it and decide not to dump either grass clippings, liquids, oils, etc. And the city of Kearney has about 4,500 curb inlets in our city limits, and we have a program where if we have volunteers who want to mark those, we give them the opportunity to, for hours or credit hours or volunteer hours for whatever it may be. We've had Boy Scout and Girl Scout troops. We've had UNK fraternities. We've had just an older folks that like to do something for the community and also get exercise while they do it. So we've had a pretty good success with that. And then stream cleanups. I'm not sure what my viewing audience, where they're located. In Kearney, we have the Kearney Whitewaters Association that has, with the assistance of some financial backing from the city of Kearney, got a program for a whitewater trail in the city of Kearney on the Kearney Canal, the Turkey Creek, the NPPD tail race, whatever you want to call it, for about less than 1,000 feet length, but it's got some rapids that can be done. It's not done. It's just being designed at this moment, but it should be started sometime this year to be completed next year. And that Kearney Whitewater organization, they clean up that section and other sections of the canal every spring. Usually take out at least 2,000 pounds of trash, miscellaneous trash, of floatables, as I call them before. Our third MCM, the illicit discharge detection and elimination. We enacted ordinances on this in 2007, and we have a storm sewer map that it's like a spider web. If you look at it as an aerial, you can see where every curb inlet is, every outfall where water drains to, where every piece of pipe is. And I essentially, as I go out in the field and I have questions from the public, and I see if there's something in the field or on the ground that does not match up to this map, I have the ability to change it on the map so it is accurately depicted and displayed, so that we're not confused in the future. So implement a program to detect non-stormwater in the system. We have outfall monitoring, which is something that we have a certain amount of outfalls within the city of Kearney's limits that drain it to the Wood River or the Platte River. And I'm responsible for observing and monitoring these on a yearly basis. So to observe if there's any sheen, smell, odor, or like fog coming up out of it, out of the water. And I also talk to our staff, our city staff, to have lots of eyes on these. So if they see something that's not right, they can tell me and I can get to the bottom of it. Um, let's see here. The next one is minimum control measures, construction site stormwater runoff control. So again, we enacted ordinance on this in 2007, and we have lots of opportunities to educate the homeowner. We have the homeowner, excuse me, the builder. There's two types of permits and two types of building that we consider to be worth monitoring, really. One is projects that disturb more than an acre of land, and that disturbance is the combination of the footprint of the project as well as the amount of area disturbed by construction activity for stockpiling, et cetera. And then the second type is lot level construction. Residential construction is just essentially a house or a garage attachment or a shed, a deck, where they disturb less than an acre. The projects that disturb more than an acre require a state permit, and that's a process of getting. You have to have an engineer design a stormwater management plan for it, and it discusses what's being done and what is being done to counter any construction runoff. On a smaller site, lot level for residential construction, they have to have something similar to that, but not through the state. This goes through the city, and we have a gentleman, we have an inspector that monitors those on a regular basis as well. So the fifth type of minimum control measure is what we call post-construction stormwater management plan. And this can be confusing, honestly. This was what the EPA found in the audit that the city of Kearney was lacking. We were really good in the other aspects of our stormwater management plan, but we did not have a post-construction program that was in place. And what a post-construction program does is it requires municipalities to require development greater than an acre to have a stormwater treatment facility, which essentially, facility is the confusing word there. It really could be a different landscaped option for water to enter and then leave. But the idea is once it enters, it stays for a certain amount of time or is constricted. So it does not leave just as fast, it leaves slower, therefore allowing sediment to drop and be consolidated and displaced and settle in a designated location while the cleaner water goes downstream. So that's a stormwater treatment facility. And there are approximately 12 of those types of facilities within the city of Kearney city limits that have been enacted due to the EPA's audit. So the audit the EPA gave us took a long time because they wanted to have us give them examples of a project going through the stages from planning and design to construction to actual seeing it work in the field after it's been completed before the EPA would sign off on our audit stating we were compliant. The sixth minimum control measure is the pollution prevention and good housekeeping. This is essentially where we monitor the city of Kearney or the municipalities aspects and operations to see what activities we do that create stormwater pollution and how we can prevent that. We have a book that has cutout sheets or just templates of all the activities we do from Kearney Park and Rec to Public Works aspects to Utilities Department and the reporting process for that. So another aspect of this is to educate the community or train community employees on good housekeeping practices. So we have 330 employees at the city of Kearney, and one thing I do every month is I send out a monthly newsletter that describes one aspect of stormwater pollution best management practices, either residential construction, how to protect curb inlets right next to a job site, to sweep up the street, to what's the responsibility of pet owners when they have pet waste, and as well as substantial projects or the general activities the city does with regards to street cleanups. So we have that. And that's all 325 people of our city employees receive that. But then there's also the people that are in the field, on the streets, that are actually doing these activities. Of course, we have financial department that they have a dozen people that sit around. They're they're not going to be participating or creating stormwater pollution. So I need to reach out to the people that are on the job sites, in the field, on the streets that are doing the stormwater pollution, and educating them. So every year I sit down with them and show them a DVD or show them a flyer, just have a general conversation with these. And there's about 125 of those people throughout the city that do that. Get some more water here. So after all that, how will our stormwater program benefit our community? There's a list, and it's very self-explanatory. The idea is to increase the water quality. And when I say increase the water quality, I should clarify that. Without a stormwater program, the water would fall and it would run across, and it would pick up stormwater pollution and it would send it on its way. That's inevitable. But with the implementation of a stormwater program, we will minimize that opportunity. So it's increased and compared to what it would be like without it. And enhanced aquatic wildlife ecosystem. So wherever the water discharges into lakes, rivers, and streams, and the outfalls won't have high increased amounts of nutrition, or less susceptible to having an algae bloom in the location. Enhanced opportunities for recreation, of course, that goes without saying. You don't want to, I mean, we have our Kearney Canal, and that is going to be the Kearney whitewater course. And without it being cleaned up, and without stormwater program or the public education and outreach working, there would still be substantial amounts of, substantial more amounts of floatables in that area, and no one would want to kayak in that. So enhanced opportunities for recreation, that's been pushed because of a cleaner area down there. Better knowledge of stormwater pollution. So one thing I do with regards to public involvement and participation, our second minimum control measure, is every 2 years I send out a stormwater survey that questions people, whoever want to answer it, that receive it. The survey is sent to the utility customers, and there's about 7,000 that receive a physical flyer or bill. And so I send out 7,000 utility flyer surveys, and I don't ask, I'm not going to give them money to give me a response. So it's really a goodwill response. They send it back to me, and I usually get about 1,500 or 1,600 responses. And I spend a lot of time divvying up those questions and answers to see how it relates to previous years and how that information has, their knowledge has improved or changed from previous years. And it is fun to see that over the course of the last 11 or 12 years, there's been a substantial increase in stormwater pollution knowledge. So with that knowledge, obviously, we hope to see change in impact and change in actions. And that would, that's something that our affects the result of the stormwater management plan is not a good way of monitoring actual physical pollution, because it's not something that's required of us to keep track of in this. I believe it is required for municipalities with a population over 100,000 people. They have a different permit to follow. They have to actually do specific monitoring of water levels and water content to see the change and just if there's any spikes and increases in anything. The minimized stormwater treatment costs. So with the knowledge I mentioned comes action ideally. So that means that people would control their floatables, control their waste, and do little efforts that would minimize stormwater pollution. Therefore, the minimization of stormwater pollution would then also minimize the amount of money that would take to then treat the water that's going through. The City of Kearney has a couple of plans in mind for, and in place and actually in design with the environmental engineer, to have a mass, like a huge, what we call a regional facility, that would treat the water of a quarter of the City of Nebraska at one location where it all drains to, because we have drainage basins throughout, and I know we've identified where they're all at and which ones need to be treated or more susceptible to stormwater pollution. So how can you get involved? Well, this information is a start. You guys are great for listening, and I expect some good questions here shortly. You can pass on this information. to your other residents, other people in your groups, communities, neighbors. But you should also know if you're in a community with over 10,000 people, there actually is a stormwater program manager that is responsible for managing a stormwater program. They may have other responsibilities as well besides that, such as myself. I'm also an engineering assistant for the City of Kearney, but stormwater program managing is my primary job, and I dabble in the other things. I found I work with about a dozen other communities around the state, from Scottsbluff to Beatrice, and they all are similar to Kearney, where they have someone who works on that, but that's not their primary job title. And as soon as we get some funding and litigation in place, I'm sure we'll be seeing some more assistance within each municipality to have a more strong and better operating stormwater program. So here's my information, my contact information. If you have questions, comments, please feel free to contact me at that, either my email address, work phone number, or send me a letter, whatever you want to do. My hours are 6:30 to 4:30 every day, Monday through Friday, excuse me. And I'll be happy to help you out, listen to you, or give you some information. I've helped other communities get through issues with their stormwater programs, because the City of Kearney went through our audit, and their other communities are afraid of getting audited, so they want to make sure that theirs is replicated and that Kearney's is replicated in theirs, so they can be sure to pass everything that comes through their way. And with that, I guess I'll ask Amanda if she has some questions for me.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you, Dan. And then yes, to all of our attendees, again, if you have any questions for Dan, you can drop that either in the chat or the Q&A function. I have both pulled up and we'll see those. Dan, we did get one question that was actually emailed in and submitted with the registration, and it was kind of about green infrastructure and what role that can play, and then kind of how individuals within that realm. So I think that one specifically mentioned rain gardens and how beneficial those are in terms of stormwater management practices.
So the rain gardens are a form of stormwater treatment facility, which I addressed in our post-construction stormwater program. So that's a form of green infrastructure. And I know I've been on tours in Omaha of their green infrastructure. That was a couple of years ago before the pandemic. And since the pandemic, though, I've actually been involved with the green infrastructure on the webinar. So we had locations throughout the state talk about our municipality's green infrastructure. So the City of Kearney has, like I said, about a dozen stormwater treatment facilities around the city that act as a way of cleaning water before it goes on to receiving waters. And the City of Kearney itself has created 2 of those, or is responsible for 2 of those. And the other 10, there's public schools has one, there's a gas station has one, Kappa has one, construction rental, and I can go on. But there is a basis of green infrastructure out there right now around the city. And the big stormwater management plan that we have in design with some environmental engineers would create a huge green infrastructure project that'd be responsible for treating a quarter of the City of Kearney's runoff. So there's some good infrastructure projects around Kearney, and I think every municipality over 10,000 officially, technically, is required to have a post-construction program, which would be monitoring their own green infrastructure projects. And I know 12 or 13 of them around the state have mimicked the City of Kearney's post-construction program. Now, whether or not they've got to the point where they've actually had projects go through the line of design, build, and see the results, I don't know. I'm not involved with that aspect of it.
Okay, perfect. We just had a question from Kathy, who asked if you know what regulations are in place for populations that are less than 10,000.
No, I do not. So I'll be up front with you on that. I know so before I worked for the city, and I worked for an engineering consulting firm, and I was the construction inspector on site, and I would go across the state and I would work on projects in communities that were less than 10,000, in fact, like 5,000 or less, really. And I worked with the municipal a representative who essentially was a jack of all trades, master of none, handyman that was just there to, to make sure fire hydrants worked and inspect stuff. And so they were the only city employee. And I mentioned Kearney's got 325. Now, what you may find interesting, and this is completely off the subject, but there's a city in Florida that has 60,000 people, and they have grants, and they contract out most of their city's work. So they only have 9 employees, and the city of Kearney's got 325, and we're 30,000, but they have, I think, 35 different contracts that take care of utilities, waste, stormwater, et cetera. So, yeah, I can't tell you the specific permit regulations for less than 10,000, but I don't think they exist unless there is a NDE or Department of Environment and Energy or Department of Environment and Quality representative that goes through there regularly to make sure there's no discharges.
Okay, we had a question that was, what are examples of enhanced aesthetic quality and how do you measure it?
Let's see, I'll go back. There it is. Yep, the second from the bottom, enhanced aesthetic value. Of course, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So I think that if you go to a lake and a river and you see trash, floatables on the river, on the water, and the lake, and you're fishing around it, that can't be aesthetically appealing. So with regards to the knowledge of stormwater pollution prevention, people minimizing that amount, minimizing their pollution and they're throwing out of the phone cups, et cetera. The way you can monitor it and is essentially visually. You're not going to go out there and count every piece of trash, but you'll be able to see less and less ideally. But yeah, enhanced aesthetic value is essentially less trash in a location or no trash in a location compared to what it'd be like if there weren't any stormwater program involved.
Okay, perfect. Well, that was the last question that we had in there, but like Dan mentioned, he threw up that email and that contact information. So if any come to you later, if you're like me, where the question comes to your mind about an hour after you actually needed to ask it, like he said, you can reach out to him there. What I'm going to do real quick before I have anyone leave is I'm going to put up a quick feedback survey that we do here at Conservation Nebraska. This is just going to let you have the opportunity to let us know how you feel about this event today. Did you learn something? Did you have a good time? Helps me with some of my reporting on the back end and grant management. And while you guys are doing that and giving us that feedback there, I just want to take some time to thank Dan. Thank you for taking an hour out of your afternoon to walk us through some of this. I definitely learned a lot. I've seen a couple of thank yous drop in, people who are new to this field, and learned a lot from you about all of this stuff.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I'll tell you what, I noticed I told you about the public education outreach, the first minimum control measure. Yes, public education and teaching this sort of thing is a requirement, but it's not something I honestly go out of my way to look for. So when someone approaches me, such as Kendra did, I will accept it, but I don't go out of my way to look for them.
Well, we appreciate the time, and this was recorded, so you don't necessarily need to do it again. We'll post it and you can refer people back to it, so you don't have to find out opportunities. And then for those attendees that are still here with us, if you know someone who might be interested in this recording will be posted on Conservation Nebraska's on our website and our YouTube page, so you can find it there and refer people there. Otherwise, unless there are any last minute questions, I think I will release everyone back to their afternoon, including Dan. I'm sure he's got a lot of stuff that he needs to take care of out there. So thank you everyone for joining us, taking some time out of your afternoon, and everyone just enjoy the rest of their Tuesday.
Thank you very much.